Well, you. Do you know who Steve Jobs is? Good. Well, some people love him, other people hate him, other people don't care about him, and then others just have no idea. I'm kidding. I don't love Steve Jobs because he was a jerk, but because he invented my favorite thing. And I'm not talking about Starbucks or frozen yogurt or anything else food or beverage related, but of course, the iPhone. And second, he was adopted. But before I would be able to meet Steve, I would have to time travel. And when I was little, I used to read the Willy and Wanda comic books where they would time travel like it was nothing. And at first I thought, time traveling should be fun. But then I got to thinking, time traveling, flying through the universe at 100 kilometers per hour, and then ending up in a place where you don't know anybody. Not so great anymore. But of course, if I would want to meet Steve, I would have to go through this dazzling experience. And the first thing I would do if I were to meet Steve Jobs is slap him and tell him, how can you invent something so addictive that I'm losing sleep over it? And then the next thing I would do is hug him and tell him, thank you for inventing something that keeps me busy during those awkward moments. And the second thing I would do is have a heart-to-heart conversation with the man who seemed to have it all. The perfect life, the perfect job, money, fame, friends. But if you look closer, you can see that his perfect life was not so perfect as it seemed. And for some of you, Steve was a bad person. How do I know? Well, we all know that Steve wasn't exactly the easiest person to work with or even just to come in contact with. But today, I'm here to tell you that Steve's sometimes irrational and sometimes very annoying behavior can be explained, well, at least in my opinion, by something that has marked him. And that something was adoption. But before I elaborate on this, I want every parent here in this room to close their eyes. And I want you to think back to that moment when your children were born. Do you remember? Of course. But do you remember how they looked? How they smelled? And how their little baby fingers were longing for someone to hold them? The baby cried, and so did you. But they were tears of happiness. But now imagine that you're that same mother that just gave birth to her baby. She didn't get to hold the baby. Simply because she didn't want to. She didn't want a baby. And now for the fathers here in the audience, just imagine you're walking around the city. And at that exact same moment, your own baby was born. But you don't know. Because you abandoned the woman that you got pregnant. So I started researching a little bit more about Steve's life because I was really intrigued by his story since I was also adopted. And I started reading his book, the 678 pages, Mamma Mia. And I was really touched by what he had to say, and most importantly, how thankful he was for his adoptive parents to love him and to take care of him like he was their own flesh and blood. Because Steve could have easily rebelled against them, and as soon as he could, go off and live his own life. But he didn't. He stayed loyal to them. Unlike to his biological parents. Because some of you might know that Steve actually went on a search for his biological parents. And about his father, he said, well, I found my father. I didn't like what I was seeing, so I left. If I were to meet Steve Jobs, if I were to meet my real father, I don't think I would be able to walk away like that. And with his mother, well, he did manage to establish a fair relationship with her, but not to say really great. But I think that's sad. You don't know your own mother. You can't come home to your own mother that gave birth to you. Like, hi mom and home, and give her a hug. Your adoptive mom is still your mom, because I love my mom very much. But Steve, he loved her as much, but he still missed something. Well, I hope I've made you realize that Steve has accomplished great things. And not only on the working level, because he invented the iPhone, MacBook, and so on. He truly changed the world that we know now, admit it. But also on a personal level. Because we've seen Steve change from that reckless young boy to that wiser older man. And he once said that we're here to put a dent in the universe. Well, think for yourself. How can I put a dent in the universe? How can I make a difference? Well, find a thing you're good at and do it. Because honestly, if it weren't for Steve's advice to do what you really want to do, I wouldn't be standing here on this very own stage. Thank you for your attention.
Is being adopted always leading to being a special person?
Well, not always, but it makes you different. You're constantly trying to be better than others. And maybe that's just a personal thing, but today I'm here not only to achieve something like I can speak in front of a public, but also I feel like it's maybe a little bit strange, but I feel like I'm that baby that got abandoned, and I want to make something of myself. I want to be able to tell myself and tell my imaginative biological mother and father, like, here I am, this is what I accomplished, be proud of me, and like, you abandoned me, but still this is the person who I become. But not everyone has that, that's just personal, so not everyone becomes that special person like Steve who invented iPhone. I mean, I couldn't do that, but that's something personal, yeah.
Did reading the book about Steve Jobs give you all the answers you wanted to know about him, or are there still questions you would like to ask him?
No, I think I read all of it, what I really wanted to know, because the guy who wrote the book, Walter Isaacson, he constantly repeated everything that happened in at the beginning of the book. And he gives new questions, like at the end of a chapter, he gives you new questions that he answers then later in the book. And everything I wanted to know about Steve Jobs, about how he handled his adoption, about how he handled being kicked out of Apple, all these things I wanted to know, I got to know in the book. So he did a good job.
In your speech, you talked about his more negative side, and you said that that was because he was adopted. So is that always an excuse, then?
Well, it's not an excuse, because you can, like kill someone, like, sorry, I was adopted. But in Steve's perspective, it's like, I don't know. It really, because he does those things, it's only because he's adopted. That's the way I see it. I mean, there's might be another logical explanation, but it's the only way I can see how he acts is because he can't deal with his adoption. And he literally said that in his book. He felt abandoned, and he projects those feelings, and that's why he acts so weird sometimes.
Would you like to meet Steve before or after he met his biological parents, if you could choose?
Maybe before, because then we would have the same experience, because I didn't met them yet. So if I were to meet Steve before he met his biological parents, I could bounce off some ideas with him, like, how would you do this, how would you do that? And if he already met his biological parents, we'll be on a different level.
Do you think that if as you being adopted, do you think that you view your own future with your children differently?
No, that doesn't change anything. I mean, I hope I have kids my own and that I don't have to adopt, because the things my parents had to go through to get me and my sister were, well, crazy and heartbreaking. So I hope I can just like meet a guy and then have a baby, and nothing more like adoption and going to other countries and finding a baby actually in a different country never been before. So I hope it goes the natural way and that I just have a nice future. But yeah, you never know.
You talked about using your iPhone at awkward moments. Could you give some examples of that?
Well, yeah. Like last year, I went to the theater with my best friend and her boyfriend. And well, you can maybe guess the story, but we were outside and they were kissing, and I was like, la 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 la, okay, yeah, yeah, kissing again, la 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 la, yeah, okay. So that's really, it was really handy, my iPhone, because otherwise I would be like, okay. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Werbrouck.